called. There we go. But to pull off the energy transition, the world needs to do an almost unimaginable amount of building. Terawatts of clean energy capacity, millions of miles of transmission lines, billions of batteries and EVs, and much, much more. The climate conversation is often focused on policy, financing and other considerations. And of course, those things are all critically important, but another question often goes overlooked. Who is going to build this stuff? I'm not talking about governments or big companies here. I mean the actual boots on the ground, so to speak. The people, the workforce. Do we have enough qualified engineers, technicians, factory workers to make and install these technologies? If not, how can we get them ready and fast? So, to talk about this, I've got some lovely guests. Shall we have a bumper? So, preparing today's workforce for a greener tomorrow. Two fantastic guests. We've got Abby Hopper, President and CEO of the Solar Energy Industries Association. Great to see you again.
You too.
And Debapriya,
Yes.
Debapriya Dutt, Director of Projects South and Southeast Asia for EarthDay.org. I used to actually work a little bit for EarthDay.org. Can you believe that?
Yes.
With the wonderful Kathleen.
Yes.
All right. So, Abby, let's start with you first. How large is the demand for workers in the renewable energy sector, and how do you see this changing?
Yeah. So the demand for energy workers, clean energy workers in the United States in particular, is growing rapidly. Just last year, the growth rate for the clean energy workforce grew at double the rate of just the regular workforce in the United States. There's literally hundreds of thousands of people employed. But your question, how's it going? Just in the solar and storage industry alone, we think it's about to quadruple. Right? And if you add wind, and then you add offshore wind, and then you add hydrogen, and then you add, I don't know, maybe another country or two.
Yeah.
And you can see
ocean,
it's wild.
tidal.
Ocean, tidal. There are technologies, there's countries, there's so much to do. So that workforce is growing incredibly quickly. And I remind my members that it's a nice problem to have, that we're growing so quickly, that we need more workers, but it's a real challenge.
Okay. So, what types of jobs are we discussing here? Are these primarily high-tech roles that require degrees, or are they opportunities accessible to a broader range of skills?
So the thing about the green economy is it is very broad and inclusive. So while there are some high-tech roles, but there are roles available for entry level as well, and not everybody requires a specialized degree. And this is precisely why at earthday.org we emphasize the importance of climate education, and we are asking for that to be included in the NDCs of every country, because what we have noticed is a lot of youth assume that they do not have an opportunity in the green economy sector because they don't have the STEM skills or high-tech degree, which is not true. Until the time there is information available for them, they will never know that they do have opportunity even at the entry level, or just certain specialized courses. Vocational training programs are enough for them to find jobs in the green energy sector. So recently, there was a survey conducted by the World Bank which shows that 83% of youth are deeply impacted by the effect of climate change, and they are genuinely interested to do something about it. But the thing is that they feel they do not have the degree or the specialized knowledge for it. And when a further survey was conducted to know how much are they aware of the basic problems that we are facing, it was found that they are not aware. 33% of them were barely aware. So they do not have the information that is necessary. And how can you possibly solve a problem if you do not understand it fully? So
Yes.
climate education, we advocate, is not just necessary, it is the biggest weapon that we have to fight this climate crisis.
I suppose it's kind of a bit nuanced as well, isn't it? Because I mean, the green economy, the old brown economy, however we want to phrase it, right? Or the clean economy versus the sort of polluting, resource inefficient economy. Lots of ways of describing it. Some of these jobs are actually the same jobs, but just with a little tweak, right?
Correct.
I mean, if you're a good plumber,
Yeah.
you can probably handle heat pumps quite quickly,
Absolutely,
right? You need
absolutely.
a little bit of retraining, but not something massive. But if you're coming out of, say, working in, say parts of a chemical factory, and you want to work in biodiversity improvements, that's probably a bit of a switch from that to that, right? To make it so there are different kinds of green jobs, some that are a little bit like the jobs that we kind of have now, but there are others that require real retraining, right?
Right.
And who does that in the USA, for example? Who does training?
So there's a lot of different organizations that are do training, and I think your point is well taken that there are different, some skill sets. For example, if you are an offshore oil and gas worker, it is not a big stretch to become an offshore wind worker, right? That sort of underwater welding is the same regardless of what the technology is, for example. And I would say, just to your point, 2/3 of the jobs in the solar and storage industry do not require a college degree, right? It is a very accessible job. But there's a number of organizations doing training, right? If you start at the federal level, there are certainly federally funded workforce training efforts. There are state level, but there are also a lot of unions that are doing job training. There are one of the interesting developments in our country is that unions see, for a long time it was sort of a binary choice. Either you like fossil fuel or you like, and people sort of picked which side of the coin they were on. And what we've seen evolve is that they realize like there's opportunity in clean energy and you can grow that. And so a lot of unions have developed labor unions have developed specific training programs. And then a lot of other organizations, like we represent a lot of big construction companies. So many of our jobs are construction jobs, right? And so companies that for 150 years have built roads and hospitals and airports, in 2008, 2009 started building solar and now employ tens of thousands of people. They have in-house training programs as well. And so they will take workers, as you said, sort of young people coming out of technical schools, people leaving the military, leaving prison, and really teach them their way of installing, building, project managing. And that's been a real source of employment and deployment, right? To make this happen.
So I suppose we're talking about the US and a rich economy with a lot of infrastructure lined up this way and a good trades union movement still. There are not many of those left, but still trades union. But in some of the developing countries, of course, these are kind of almost brand new industries coming in. If you have living in a rural area of Bangladesh or something, and suddenly these are engineering jobs, and they have to meet certain standards, and so you get the certification. This is where you get some challenges too, don't you? So the world is different in different places in terms of green jobs.
Yes, it is. While there are a lot of training programs that are available now, and if we work with the local communities, we engage in training programs for them, there is a definite way of solving this. And also, there are government-aided programs for training people in these sector of jobs, because like she mentioned that a lot of times you do have the fundamental skills, it just needs a little bit of tweaking. So that transition is very smooth in that case. And I feel that, I think there is so much of overemphasis on the negative impacts of whether it is climate change or how difficult it is to transition into the green economy or avail green jobs, but there is not enough emphasis on the possibilities and how it can really be so smooth. So I think we at earthday.org really believe in changing the narrative from talking about the negative impacts to looking at, hey, what else is possible and what can we create here, because there are ample opportunities even in the green economy space for everybody, literally.
There's something that the United Nations Educational and Scientific and Cultural Organization, UNESCO, which most ordinary people know UNESCO as the person that puts the sticker on the site and calls it the World Heritage Site. But actually they do a lot more than that, and they have a unit within that, don't they, working in countries around the world that does something called TIVET. Is it TIVET? Teaching vocational something training. So they are actually in quite a few countries around the world bringing these vocational training programs to the assistance of national governments in some of the poorer countries of the world. And often this is funded by overseas development aid agencies. So GIZ in Germany and USAID, and I don't know if USAID does it, but for example. So there's a role there in terms of, because actually it's in everyone's interest to fight climate change, right? No one country can solve it. So the more green jobs there are in the developing countries and more quickly, it's actually in the interests of the UK, the USA, Europe, as well as in the countries of concern, right?
I think sort of a point to build upon what you said at the beginning about youth and sort of the motivation, right? We've done polling amongst our workforce, and the youngest generation of workers are really motivated by a desire to do social good, right? They prioritize that perhaps over some other sort of more historic benefits, and this area of clean energy deployment and other technologies is an area that fills that need. Like we see that in our own workforce as a company, we see that in our workforce in our country, and so, I love the way you framed it. Like this is not only a conversation about sort of bad outcomes and scarcity, but really about positive outcomes and opportunity and growth, and sort of targeting young people's desire to be part of the solution and making it accessible is really important.
Really, and also not just their desire to do good, the fact that a lot of them suffer from what we call climate anxiety and what is referred to as climate burden. I think the transition towards taking action towards it can happen seamlessly if there is enough information available for them. So the anxiety can then transcend into informed action towards the planet, and then that whole burden needn't be a burden, but there is enough and more ways of mitigating climate change and also developing adaptability. I think when we have the information available, we know how better to adapt to the rising temperatures, develop flood resilience, for example, to have better preparedness for disasters.
Yes.
So all of
that's also very important training. Yes. I mean, literally, it can often mean alerts that people literally jump up into the tops of trees, right? And how do you get up into that tree? And can you jump? That's another thing too. But I suppose there's two broad sides to this in some ways. One is you've got the young people coming into the economy, and you want them trained to be able to take part in the green economy as quickly as possible and to have training. Then you've got an older generation that's being basically laid off from work because their industry is no longer in step with what we want, right? Like the oil and gas industry, for example, or coal mining, right? So, and that's also very political as well, because those people need to know that they can be retrained very quickly into new jobs that will come in the green economy. If not, they're going to be the kind of people that vote against any action on climate change because they feel frustrated and victims, right? So there's some also psychology in this training, as well as the practicalities of it too, in terms of creating consensus that this is a good direction we're going in. Would
Well,
you,
that is a very good point, and I would add to it that not only is there a job in the clean energy economy, but it is a good job, right? It's a job that you can sustain your family on, that has health and safety standards, and you can see a future for yourself. And that's been one of the areas where we've gotten pushback in the United States, is that we've heard someone who maybe was in a coal miner, and some of us might think, well, now you get to work on a roof, right? And you're outside in the sun. What could there be to not like about that? And they say, well, I have a union and I have a pension, and you want me to come work in the solar industry? Like, where are those similar kinds of benefits? And so that has been an interesting conversation. Some of the provisions of the Inflation Reduction Act have required prevailing wage, required apprenticeship, and so we're getting a little bit more routinized in some of those areas, but. You're right. There is more than just skills training, right? There is sort of being a part of a solution. The other thing I hear a lot is that maybe at least here in the United States, or not. I'm not in the United States now, but in the United States, I live in Appalachia. I live in Kentucky. I live in West Virginia. I don't want to move to California or Arizona or somewhere where there's a thriving solar market.
Yeah.
Luckily the prices are such that you don't have to anymore. Like the market's growing everywhere, but that's a real issue, is like matching people and skills and place.
Yeah. I do think with the developing countries, one of the things that would be a great boost for this training would be if more companies that make solar or wind or I don't know, energy efficient heat converters or whatever the products are that are part of the green economy, instead of just kind of selling them into the developing countries, actually put manufacturing sites in some of those places, because then you'd have an automatic need for training courses for local people for these new jobs. And some have done it. I think Vestas have done it Siemens did it in Morocco, I think. Siemens did it in Morocco. But a bit more of that would actually then create those opportunities for people to join the workforce there.
Right.
And as long as it's, not being seen by some other countries as, oh, we're offshoring everything to developing countries, as long as some balance in this, that could be an important factor too.
Yes.
So we've got just 1 minute and 28 seconds left. So any little wrap up here on this? There's clearly going to be growing jobs in this sector, right? And it's a question of what we do to make sure there's a workforce. And I think there's probably half the workforce don't need much training, because it's pretty similar jobs. If you're a train driver in an electric train, it's a bit like driving a normal train. But those other areas, maybe going from mechanical engineering to electrical engineering, is a bit of a step. I don't know.
Yeah.
Any thoughts?
So it's sort of in closing, I agree with that, and I think it sort of goes to the question of an equitable transition, right? And as I think about what an equitable transition means, right? It does mean that the workforce is reflective of the communities that it serves, right? And so I think we can make a statement that broad that can apply to a lot of different kinds of communities, but certainly that is reflective of the communities it serves. And secondly, we're as hard as we've all been working with like precipice of this emerging industry that is going to continue to grow, and there is so much wealth creation that's possible.
Yes.
And one of our goals is to make sure that wealth creation is also shared, right? That is not sort of we don't repeat some of the sort of monopolization that we've seen in some other industries, but that there are opportunities for entrepreneurship and ownership that's different.
Yes.
So very briefly, because we're now 8 seconds over time.
So I think at this point I would like to mention the renewable energy sector is really growing, and the earthday.org theme for next year in fact is power our planet, and which means we need trained workforce. So the more we have training in place, there are so many ample opportunities that are available even in the renewable energy sector. So training, climate education, getting climate education into the NDCs is really the way forward. Because like they say that the future is either green or not at all.
Okay.